I want to glow. I want to go like, and then start.
Oh, good thing I have this DNA that no one knows anything about.
Mhm.
Risk. Risk is our business.
Out there. That way.
What happened?
Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits.
Rock and roll.
6.
We're not afraid of diversity. We don't persecute it, we embrace it.
At least I won't die alone. Join our Federation of Planets. And reach for the stars.
Those were the days.
Welcome back to the Retrek Review. Thanks for joining us as we cover another episode of Star Trek. My name is Will, and this is my co-host,
Caleb.
and we this week are covering an episode of Strange New Worlds, episode 3 to be specific, entitled Ghosts of Illyria. The episode first aired May 19th, 2022, and it was written by Kayla Cooper and Bill Wolkoff, and it was directed by Leslie Hope. The synopsis for the episode is: the USS Enterprise encounters a contagion that ravages the ship. One by one, the entire crew is incapacitated except for number 1, Una Chin Riley, who must now confront a secret she's been hiding as she races to find a cure. That's our synopsis. And now we do the thing that Caleb loves. We ask him, what does he think of the episode overall?
I do love it because I get to talk. It was a pretty good episode. I feel like I say that every week when we get on here. I say, yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah.
But no, it's been the first season so far, Strange New Worlds, has just been consistently like strong, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the storyline. I kind of like getting you get to learn more about some of the characters in this episode. That is interesting and kind of moves that stuff forward. But I think overall it was just good. It was a good story. It had a lot of cool beats. I love anytime that people get beamed out of a planet and the captain and somebody else has to stay behind. They're kind of separated from the ship, and the ship's kind of on its own. And then the second person in command has to deal with the situation. And you get to see a lot more of the Doctor in this episode.
Yep.
Which I like. I like Flock as a character, because he always got up into stuff where he had to like save everybody all the time.
Yeah.
So getting to see the ship captain or the ship medic be a big part of this episode was nice for me.
Yeah,
and that's all I'll say for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. I feel like it is a nice snapshot of an episode. It doesn't really touch on Pike's stuff anymore. Like that kind of wasn't talked about. And
It's
now
true.
it starts to peel back the layers of other characters.
It feels like a Star Trek episode. You know what I mean?
Yep. It's kind of like the same episode when it's like a thing where, I mean, the show hasn't been around as long as Enterprise was at this point, but it's like that episode when it's revealed that like Malcolm is a part of Section 31 and he's like a double agent, or at least like he used to work for these guys.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's kind of like that. You also get this thing where it's like, about several characters. So
yeah, I like that. I like that the ship is not like completely like unified. I like that
Mm,
a lot of characters have their own kind of like personal stuff that they're dealing with or like hiding from
yeah.
the crew.
Yeah.
I think that's very realistic. I think that's very like
Oh
human.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 I think also, not to like toot our own horn, but I think also that's what makes like the RPG thing that we play fun. Like everybody
Yeah.
has like their own little thing that isn't revealed yet, So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I like that kind of stuff a lot.
all right, so we'll open with the teaser before the rolling credits, and it says first officer's log, stardate 1224.3. The Enterprise has arrived at Hematet 9, the site of an abandoned Illyrian colony. Illyrians are a humanoid species known for modifying their genes to enhance their capabilities and levels of function. However, because genetic modification is forbidden in the Federation, they have always been outcasts. Our presence here is part of a standing mission to discover what happened to them. Unfortunately, research time on the surface is limited, as the planet is regularly swept by ion storms, one of which is fast approaching. The USS Enterprise is in orbit around Hetemet
Yeah.
9, an abandoned colony of the Illyrians, a humanoid race considered outcast by the Federation due to their use of genetic engineering. On the surface, Captain Pike comments on how genetic modification still put people on edge, even Una, who is standing next to him. She replies simply that she doesn't like loose ends. As the storm approaches, both see the flimsy shelters as little protection, and Una suggests returning to the ship. Pike orders the landing party to collect their data and return to the rendezvous point for transport. He attempts to communicate with Spock, but the storm interference blocks his signal. He tells Una to gather the rest of the team while he goes to find Spock. One of the landing crew, an ensign, lands as peering into a cabinet full of glassware used in scientific research. Noticing it, seems to react to his flashlight. When Pike spots him and gestures for him to move out. So we get get to see that huge like space cloud over the ion storm.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That was pretty cool.
I always love like storms and stuff like in space. It reminds me a lot of like No Man's Skies when like an ion storm will come through, or like a high heat storm will come through on these like planets. That's kind of cool. And the ion stuff is cool because it messes with all of your electronics and your like ship stuff and stuff that they rely on pretty heavily.
I think even like your own like bio electricity, like your own body stuff. Yeah,
it's not good.
No,
it's really not good for you.
No.
But here's something that is cool to me that I kind of picked up on. Okay. And I don't know if it's supposed to be what you're supposed to pick up on.
Okay.
But I think it'd be really interesting for like Pike's character.
Okay.
So number one says, before they go to beam out, she says, "Oh, I'll go get Spock." And Pike says, "No, I'll do it." And so how I read that is Pike in the back of his head knows like what his future is. He knows like, so basically it's almost like, I like to think about it the way that he says, you guys beam out and get out of here because I don't know if you're in danger or not.
Right.
But I'm not in danger. So like if I go get Spock, I know I'm going to be fine. I know me and Spock are going to be fine because like this isn't where my time ends.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good point. It might have been how they wrote him to do that.
It could just be a captain thing too. Like captain's going to make sure everybody's ready to beam out.
Yeah, no, you're probably right, because the way that they have them act it and the way that they deliver that scene where she's like, "I'll go do it," and he's like, "No, I'll go do it," type of thing.
Yeah.
It might have been because he knew what was going to happen, and then if something bad was to happen, Spock would only die, essentially, not
Pike,
right.
Yeah, that's kind of what what I took from that
that's
scene.
a good point. Yeah,
And I kind of like that. I think they could write him like that and have it be more subtle than every week just being like, man, 10 more years. You know what I mean?
right,
Like,
yeah.
and that's kind of why I like this episode. Like you were saying, this is the first episode now that like it's not touched on, that like his death is coming up.
Right.
That can just be a part of his character, and you can write in a way where it's not every week he's talking about, well, yeah, 9 more years and 3 months. It's
Yeah,
like
right.
You can show that.
Yeah, just how he reacts to things and stuff like that.
Yeah, like he's gonna go do the dangerous thing because, like, you know, this isn't his date. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it
So-
also, I can't remember quite if they show this, but I think it might also, you would think it would lend to him just not really being afraid of
Yeah.
situations where it's like, well, I'm not going to die here. So it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like if this big scary monster or guy is trying to kill me, it's like, well, he's not going to. So it's
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting concept, right? Because I think
Yeah.
even if that were the case, I think you still have to do something to like protect yourself. I don't think he could just kind of stand there. I think that would kind
No.
of change the shape of history, right? So it is this interesting thing where he thinks it's predestined. His destiny is predestined, but also like he has to be an active like participant, I guess, in a way.
yeah. I know.
Because he can't just like not do anything and say, like, well, I'll be fine.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so Una assembles her team at the rendezvous point and calls up for the transporter. Transporter Chief Kyle struggles to get a transporter lock due to storm interference. He calls to Commander Hemmer in engineering asking for power. Hemmer transfers auxiliary power, then calls the bridge to warn them he is tapping into the emergency backups. In the corridors of the ship, the lights flicker as the power is transferred, while the lights in engineering become brighter. Hemmer tells Kyle to try the transporter again. Kyle is stunned at the amount of power he has, to which Hemmer replies simply that he was a genius, before warning the chief to move quickly. This time, the transport is successful, but Una expresses the hope that Kyle was not out of miracles just yet. The captain and Spock were still on the surface.
This is one of our first parts of there's a couple parts in this where this is kind of like a running theme where they say, oh, we can't do that. Well, just do it. That's kind of been our thing.
It really has, yeah.
This one is more realistic, honestly, like using backup power to like put all power to the transporter. Like that is fine. That I get.
Yeah.
So I'm not being critical on that. It's
No.
him replying that he's a genius is just funny. It's just his character.
Yeah,
It's like he just converted power to the the thing, you know.
Yeah. The interesting thing for you, I think you'll like, because you have watched The Mandalorian and a couple other things in that new filming type. So, like engineering,
Yeah.
it could be away mission stuff, but I'm just going to say at least engineering. They also film with that giant moving screen that like Mando uses.
That's cool.
Yeah. So that like awesome depth, and like when they go to the
Yeah.
engine room and it looks like it's incredibly long, as we'll get into with like when Lalande shows up there. And
Yeah.
stuff, and it looks like it's huge. It's that giant. It's that thing that they use. I can't.
I
of
think
what it's
that's
called,
gonna
but
become more of like industry standard
yeah.
in the next like few years.
Oh yeah.
Because if you can film on this wrapped screen like that and put all this depth in the background and then put
Right.
like physical props in the foreground, it's like that mirrored effect. It's like
Yeah.
that. And it just
And
works
all-
so well.
Yeah, and all you hear is the actors love it because now they actually have something to look at, and not just a
They can
giant
look, they
green
can see
screen.
it. Yeah, they can
Right.
see it. So they feel like they're part of the
Yeah, it lends to
Yeah.
their sincerity and their like how much they, like, well, okay, I'm in this. If you're this guy, I'm in this makeup.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I mean, the actor who plays him is blind, so he's not seeing anything, but still,
Oh, is he actually really blind?
yeah, the guy's actually blind. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He might not be like 100% blind, but
Yeah.
he's definitely vision impaired.
I was thinking about that in that scene where he walks over to the computer and he's typing, putting in codes and stuff on it.
Yeah. Hemmer's cool.
Yeah, he is cool. He's a cool character. I really like we'll get there, but I really like when he's trying to transport the the core of the sun on the ship.
Yeah. It's like more.
I need more juice.
Inside one of the colony's laboratories, Pike catches up to Spock, who reports that he has found a previously undiscovered cache of journals that may be of scientific relevance, adding that he looks forward to reading them. Pike urges him to hurry to the rendezvous point before the storm overtook them so he could read them. They reach the rendezvous, and Pike calls up for transport. But again, Kyle is unable to get a lock, and this time, extra power will not help. The storm is too strong. Una tells Pike to find shelter until the storm passes. Pike acknowledges and asks Spock for suggestions. Spock simply suggests they run.
Yeah. Those the library was pretty cool. Like
You talking about the thing that he was like reading? Yeah.
Well, the
It's
whole like library is that room, and then they have all the things all light up, and then you pull these like essentially what's the word I'm looking for? Scrolls type
yeah.
And he like turns the thing on the end, and you can kind of see through the clear glass like that it's like written text in there.
Yeah.
And he's like turning it. So it's almost like it's this continual like roll of like paper or something that it just like turns as you read it. And I'm like, that's kind of a cool concept, you know?
Yeah. It really is. Yeah. I liked it.
But you knew they were going to get stuck in the library.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I just gonna say I like it because it's like it's a for him as an actor. It's like when you and I have filmed short things, like having something to do with your hands.
Yeah,
is really like it's great. It really lends. You can really like. I don't know. You can just sell your performance better when you have like something you're doing.
Yeah, you need a prop, like a real world prop. So even the last episode where Uhura has her tablet and her like her pen, her like stylus. This is a natural thing where like even this, like if she's like talking and thinking and you're going to be doing something with your hands.
Right.
And it's more realistic because people don't just stand there with their hands at their side and talk.
Yeah, like this straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're anxious or they're thinking and she's tapping her pen on the thing and she's doing notations. Like I like that.
Yeah.
It sells it,
It really does. Yeah.
I really like Pike. I like his like quips, his like one-liners.
Yeah.
Like that whole thing, like, Spock is like super interested in like the history, like the manuscripts, and Pike's like, yeah, well, that's great, but if we don't move, you're not gonna be able to read them like at all. So like I like that. I like how their two characters react to each other.
Una arrived on the bridge to inform the crew that Pike and Spock were still on the surface. Until they could be retrieved, the crew would continue to do their jobs. She asks Uhura if she can get a signal to the surface, but Uhura reports the storm is a communications blackout. Una tells her to inform her immediately once she is able to communicate with the captain. To Lieutenant Wheeler at the science station, Una orders round-the-clock sensor sweeps and also wants Chief Kyle on standby with the transporter. Roaming through Deck 14, Lieutenant Ortegas finds Ensign Lance removing his uniform and staring at a wall console. He thinks the ship is too dark and begins to rub his face up against one of the light panels in the corridor, saying he wants to feel the light on his skin, which slightly unnerves Ortegas, who tries to continue on her way. Then he runs his head through the glass of the panel, leading Ortegas to call for security. In her quarters, Una is experiencing a similar effect, tearing open her own uniform tunic and basking in the light. Her skin begins to take on a reddish glow before reason snaps back. She realizes something is wrong. She calls Dr. Mbenga in sickbay, asking about the status of the landing party. Mbenga reports that he has several members of the landing party in sickbay right now, and in fact was just about to call her. While she assures him she herself is fine, the doctor asks her to come to sickbay anyway, just to be sure. As she heads out, she looks at herself in the mirror, a worried expression on her face.
This episode, it kind of reminds me of the episode of Enterprise where, remember, they're all going like they hyper focus on like one specific thing of like their character.
Yeah.
So Archer's focusing on his like thing at the end of his dad's book.
Yeah.
And Trip is focused on the chair, and Malcolm's focused on like security.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that episode, and that I think maybe that's why I liked it more. Is because like you get to see people on the ship kind of start to freak out.
Yeah.
And the more you see, it's like the worse it gets. So it becomes this thing with like, okay, you gotta like take care of it. But yeah, so like I didn't know where they were gonna go with her character.
Yeah.
Number one's character, because like they show her being sick, and then she shows up in the med bay and she's like fine, and you're like, okay, something's going on.
Right. Yeah.
So when she first takes control of the command, I really like that scene. She comes into the bridge and she kind of like puts her hand on the chair and kind of like takes a second, and then she kind of catches everybody up to speed where Pike is, and continue your job. And she does very well of like taking control of the situation. And that I like. I feel like on the Enterprise, who usually T'Pol takes control.
Typically, yeah.
And she's okay, but sometimes she becomes more like emotional, or sometimes she's more like not emotional about things.
Yeah, I think in this scenario, if you were to make it exactly like a beat for beat, I think it would be Archer and T'Pol would have been stuck on the planet, and Trip would have come back up, and Trip would have taken over the bridge.
Yeah.
Even though he's like the engineering guy, and he's not.
Well, he's like,
And T'Pol is second in command. It's like T'Pol is also the science officer, so it's a hard mix. It's hard to know.
Well, I think a lot of times what happens is like T'Pol, she sees it from like a scientific standpoint, where like when she takes control, she doesn't think specifically like what's best for the crew or the people stuck on the planet. It's very like, she's Vulcan, so it's very this is what we should do.
Yeah.
But I liked Yeah, that's right. So I think Trip's like what, third in command, so he takes control of the bridge a few times.
Yeah, I think for the show purposes and for like the way Archer commands it, I think he is third in command, but I think on like Starfleet records he's second in command.
Interesting.
Because she's like a person from the Vulcan Science Academy. She's not really a Starfleet officer, so it's not like she has chain of command.
But Archer always is the one that like specifically says like to Paul, you have the bridge when he leaves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he makes her second in command.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because we trust her.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. It's just funny too. Like she knows that she's sick, and she tells the doctor, and he's like, "Oh yeah, actually, there's like a bunch of people down here. They're all like horribly sick." He's like, "Why are you calling? Are you sick?" She's like, No, just a coincidence."
Yeah. Okay. He's like, all right. Well, okay.
Well, you should probably come down here anyway,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Okay. As Nurse Chapel attends to some of the others, Mbega tells Una that what he has seen, half of the landing party have burned or shocked themselves on sources of illumination, and yet the light was the only thing calming them. Something is attracting them to light, and they will go through any means to get to it. When Mbenga asks if she has experienced similar symptoms, Una falsely tells him she hasn't, before asking if there was any sign of contagion. Though the biofilters in the transporter would detect anything abnormal, the doctor ran viral and bacterial scans anyway and found nothing. The only thing he detected was a severe drop in their levels of cholecalciferol or something like that, or vitamin D. Were it not for that and for their apparent behavior, no one would have guessed they were sick. He shows Una's vitamin D levels to be normal, but suggests taking a blood sample just in case. She is hesitant for some reason, but agrees nonetheless. And Benga expresses the hope that the captain and Spock, still on the surface, have not been exposed to whatever is causing the problem, thinking that the landing party came into contact with something on the surface that the biofilters missed. So it kind of made me wonder, this scene made me think about scurvy. It's like when they get stuff and then so I was like, I don't know. I don't, and I'm not a scientist, so it's like, I don't really know, but I was like, if you have like a crazy drop in vitamin D, do you actually get crazy and like want light?
I don't know. I mean, we have things like cabin fever.
Right.
Where I think, but that's more like being cooped up.
Yeah.
But I think it has something to do with light too. I mean, it usually affects people like in places like Alaska where it's dark and you're stuck inside from the snow.
I think doesn't the original, like when you say cabin fever, I think again it means boats. You've been like in the bow of the boat like for way too long, and it's just dark. There's no windows down there, and you're just way down there.
Yeah, and what
they called those scurvy, things like cabins.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's definitely where it came from. Scurvy is like a deficiency too, right? It's
a deficiency in.
They need fruit. You need
they're not having citrus. They need citrus things, and I forget. Is it vitamin C? I think it's low on vitamin C.
Yeah.
So So that's why they used to stock them with like limes and oranges and stuff on the ships.
Oh, yeah. It's a little too citrusy.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what happens.
I mean, I'm sure it's just how this fake disease is just, playing out in this episode. But I was just wondering, is that actually true? Like if you have like a severe, like you're bottoming out kind of vitamin D. Like not like, oh, you're low like everyone here in upstate New York.
I was gonna say, like we get winter depression up here where you don't see the sun for a week and you get real depressed. Yeah. But this was like they basically turned into like lizards.
Yeah, exactly.
Like touch the light bulbs and
I
like that. I like when that guy puts his head through the glass. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I like how she too. I always forget her name, but she's walking by and talking to him. She's like, "Yeah, well, that's weird, but just another day on the Enterprise, really."
Yeah, Lieutenant Ortegas. Yeah.
And then once he like puts his face through the thing, then she's like, "Oh, okay, so this is something bad."
So in engineering, Una brings this possibility up to Hemmer, who dismisses it as nonsense. The biofilters would have removed any contamination during transport, unless Una suggests it was something they wouldn't be programmed to filter out. Hemmer assures her it was impossible, as the transporter would filter out anything it didn't recognize. Then she wonders if storm interference could have caused it, short of turning the landing party into the bioorganic stew. Hemmer again denies it.
Yeah.
Una then suggests that the emergency power could have affected the biofilters, but again, Hemmer shoots that down. However, sensing her exasperation, he reluctantly agrees to conduct a level 5 diagnostic scan on the ship's power systems, which he grumpily adds would probably take all night.
Yeah. That's like something Trip would do.
Yeah.
Be like, no, like he would reason like it's impossible and that it couldn't happen, and then he'll say, well, if it makes you feel better, I'll I'll do a level 5 diagnostic on it. And then it always comes back. What happens? Is it always comes back like, well, looks like this got through this thing.
Yeah. It's always like, oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't think about the accelerated warp fields. Yeah. One of the coil alignments filtration was just a little bit off.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, good thing we ran a level 5 diagnostic.
Yeah.
Level 4 wouldn't have caught that.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I like him. I like him as the engineer.
Yeah, he's good. He's good stuff.
It kind of reminds me of John. Reminds me of John's engineer,
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
chief engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not always talking about cheeseburgers though.
If he was, yeah, I was gonna say if he's a little more foolish and talked about cheeseburgers more, he would be pretty spot on. Back on the bridge, Una is able to briefly speak to Pike. He and Spock are all right, but are trapped in the colony's library due to the storm. Una begins to explain about what Mbenga has discovered, but before they can go much further, the storm interference blocks the signal again. Going into the conference room, she calls up the computer's records on Illyrian genetic modifications, specifically pertaining to disease control. She then specifies any record pertaining to the original Illyrian settlement in the Voltaria Nebula. The computer reports the records are limited. Behind her, La'an enters, having been summoned. Una informs her about the potential contamination brought up from the surface and tells her to have security on the lookout for strange behavior. La'an sees the computer screen's information about the Illyrians, wondering if they were somehow involved. Una is unsure, saying she is just doing research. La'an thinks the Illyrians' history is one of the reasons why the Federation is wary of genetically modified species. Una thinks that if the Illyrians were behind the problem, they could also provide the solution. But Illyrian medical technology was banned by Federation regulations, mainly because of the eugenics wars. Una knows La'an is all too familiar with that time period. The chief of security is a descendant of Khan Noonien Singh. La'an admits that one could not have had a bioengineered mass murderer for an ancestor without growing a thick skin. She studied Khan extensively as a child and thought the worst of it would be being bullied by the other children. La'an suddenly expresses similar symptoms to the landing party, saying the room was too dark. Una immediately calls Mbenga.
So her grandfather.
Yeah, it would be, oh man, it would be like 5 type of levels. Her like a great
Oh, okay.
grandfather.
Because she says grandfather. She specifically says like,
Yeah. He was born, he would have been born sometime in like the 1960s.
So this is the original guy
Yes.
that created the eugenics war.
Yes, he's one of the main. Yes.
So the guy from Enterprise, then the eugenics stuff that Enterprise deals with, he was just a scientist that wanted to further study that stuff.
Yes. So that is like, so the eugenics wars happen, which they happen like in the 90s, 1990s.
Yeah.
They happen, and then he finds what's his name there? I think his name's like Eric Soong. He finds the embryos of more augments.
Okay.
And then raises them as his own children. Because he thinks that he can like basically use these children and these people to like help facilitate disease and like bring peace to the galaxy and all this stuff. Right. But as he learns, they have like this weird inherent like aggressive part to them. Like they can't just be peaceful and quiet.
Yeah.
Except for that one guy who the Enterprise takes along, but like they find he has like a genetic flaw. That's why he's not like.
Well, he was trying to. That's what he was trying to do towards the end. Anyway, was trying to filter out like the aggression.
Yeah.
And rate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't like that too much. So those kids.
So here's the other thing I'll tell you. I've been saving it because now she goes into this room to look at stuff.
Yeah.
So Illyrians.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? It's probably an episode that you would have hard forgetting. Do you remember the episode that Archer wants like the warp coil thing? And he goes and he talks to these people, and then they're like, "No, I'm sorry, we can't give it to you. We're trying to get home." And he's like, and then he boards the ship and takes it anyways.
Oh yeah.
And he puts all the food and he gives them stuff, and then the guy's like, "It's literally going to take us 3 years to get home. You've stranded us. You've killed us, essentially." And Archer's like, "Yeah, I know, but like, I have to deal with the Expanse, right?" Those are Illyrians.
Wow. Different
So-
colony.
Yeah, different colony, and you almost. I mean, again, we don't get a lot of information about the Enterprise those people, but you could speculate that they have like the weird ridges and stuff because of that's how they deal with the Expanse. It's like they could have been genetically modified
Oh,
to look like that for any reason.
gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah, kind of cool. Like again,
That is
a
cool.
direct Enterprise thing. Like they're not in any other series; they're only in Enterprise. So that's cool.
I kind of like that. Like I like where there's a little bit of like grayness from like the original series.
Yeah.
And they can kind of make like this number one character like give her a better backstory and
Yeah,
like
give her
really
anything,
rework it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have her be just more than just a human person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Lon is sedated in sickbay, suffering from the same vitamin D deficiency as the landing party. Lon had not been on the landing party, but Chappell checked the contact tracing and found she had shared a turbolift with Lance. The contagion seems to be spreading, but Mbenga is unable to determine how. He recommends locking down the ship to keep it from spreading. Una opens a ship-wide channel and initiates the lockdown. All non-essential personnel were confined to quarters, and all on-duty personnel were to remain in their work areas until further notice. It was funny when the scene happened, and he's like, "Oh, it's contagious because of now the
Yeah.
world we live in." I immediately was like, "Oh yeah, like COVID," and it's just like
Yeah.
it's interesting now when things happen, like the way people how they write things, the things that they talk about. It's like now the world has like a different viewpoint on like disease and stuff like that. It's an interesting,
That is fun. I didn't even think about that. It's like the same time period,
yeah,
like while writing the show.
yeah. They might. I don't know when they filmed it. This came out in the middle of summer, so I would assume they filmed end of 21, beginning of 22. So like,
Yeah.
COVID was the thing.
Yeah. It was the hot topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, on the surface, the storm rages and Pike and Spock remain trapped in the library. The captain paces restlessly, to which Spock quotes a human metaphor about how a watched kettle never boils. Pike corrects it to pot, yet expresses the belief that they would still get hit with the scalding water. There were sick people on the ship, and he was stuck on the surface. Spock admonishes him that anxious pacing would not help the situation. Pike stops, looking out at the storm. He sarcastically calls it fun and suggests selling tickets. Spock has been reading the journals he found and learned that the Illyrians on Hetemet wanted to join the Federation, reversing their genetic modifications or de-engineering themselves, as Spock puts it. Pike asks if there was any record of what happened to the colony. Spock is only halfway through the records, so Pike tells him to skip to the end before the storm destroys the building they were in. Just then, both look out upon hearing a shrieking sound and see figures of light moving through the air. Pike asks if Spock saw what he did, and Spock confirms he had, but as to what he saw, he was not sure.
It's the ghosts.
Yeah. It's the ghost of Illyria. I like his little Spock is just trying to read and he's like walking around the room.
Yeah. Yeah, it's human emotion.
Yeah. Human emotion.
I really like too that he gets that phrase wrong. But it's funny. It's funny because like it's a watched pot never boils.
Yeah.
But the kettle is so much funnier too because like Vulcans drink tea.
Yeah.
So like obviously he took the human phrase and made it like fitting for Vulcan,
Yeah.
which
Well,
I think is funny. I like that.
Yeah, which I mean, really what made it, if you want to get super
Into the
nerdy
weeds,
about it,
yeah.
what
I
might have
do.
happened is when you say the English word pot,
Yeah,
and when
it
you translate
translates.
that into Vulcan, pot equals kettle.
Yeah,
Because they don't use pots, they use kettles, like type of thing. You know what I mean? In their terminology. So
Yeah.
for him to be like, well, yeah, the only thing that would have water that's boiling is a kettle. Like, why, so.
yeah.
So we're at the second half. So what I'm going to ask is that anybody who's got this far into the podcast to go down to the comment section, if you're on YouTube watching, and write the secret word kettle. We'll know that you got this far. Thanks.
Kettle.
What's that?
Kettle.
Kettle.
I'll put
It's
on
like-
the kettle.
It's like cattle, but it's kettle.
Kettle and kettle.
Uhura has awakened in her sleep cubicle by light radiating from the closed door.
Uhura has awakened.
Awakened.
And she's like, what are y'all doing in my bedroom?
What's happening in here?
But honestly, it was cool that like their workstations have like a sleeping area
Oh yeah.
for like shifts and stuff. I like that.
Yeah. It looked a little impractical to like climb in there the way that later when Una gets in there, but
Yeah. But yeah, the door shutting is pretty sweet. Like
the
being able to
door
close
shutting
the door.
is very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as she opens it, she finds two members of the crew standing around a simulation of a sun and tells the computer to end the simulation. The two crewmen demand to know what she has done, as they needed light. The contagion is spreading. Nearing 50 members of the crew were now in sickbay, forcing Mbenga to open the auxiliary bay to handle the overflow. Chapel reports contact tracing was all over the place. Some were getting it from being down the hall from an infected person. Meanwhile, Uhura appeared to be fine despite her contact with the two infected crewmen. Just then, Hemmer enters, and Una asks if he found anything. The Anar engineer sarcastically replies that of course he had, because he wandered the ship in the middle of the night running diagnostics for fun. He returns to business, telling Mbenga that he needed to run a check on the emergency medical transporter for excess power usage. Mbenga protests that he was running an experiment while Hemmer runs his checks. As he does, the light in sickbay suddenly dim. Hemmer, noting the system's check could not have affected the lights. Mbenga tells him to stop messing with the system, as he was making things worse. Point taken, Hemmer replies caustically as he leaves. After he does, Mbenga reactivates the life. After he does, Mbenga reactivates the lights.
No, you were
much
right.
to the relief of the distressed crew. What's that?
You were right. You reactivated the life.
True. So I was thinking about when I watched this episode, I thought about you when she gets out of her bed, like her bed area. What do they call it here?
Yeah.
They called it her sleep cubicle. When she
Sleep
got out of-
quarters. Yeah.
She got out and they were like, "Oh, the sun."
Hey, why did you shut the lights?
Yeah. I thought of you because I was like, maybe the fireplace was a simulation, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
it was this thing was clearly giving off heat to the point where they were getting burned by it. So
That's true.
I
I'm
was
telling you,
thinking-
the fireplace is a simulation. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the only practical.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
Hey, why did you turn off
But-
the lights?
hey. We hates it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but also, so what I appreciate too is because, like, I always tell you, like, it's so funny, like, in Enterprise and like the originals, like, they have to like use the actual like wall
Mm,
comms,
yeah.
and like in that situation specifically is like what I was talking about last week. It's so much better now where she can just literally say
Oh.
like, computer, call sick bay instead
Mhm.
of being like she has to like walk past those two guys and like push the button on the wall
Right.
and be like, this is I need sick bay immediately.
And then fight off two guys with their other arm.
Yeah.
Like while she
Because
keeps
how many times does something bad happen in Enterprise where they're like, oh, okay, and they try to be like sneaky about it and they walk over to the comms and they're like, I need security immediately.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
That's why they never knew what was going on the ship, because nobody was running to wall comms and telling them.
Oh. That's why they got boarded and all of engineering and all the red shirts died all the time.
Constantly, yeah. Somehow the crew is getting massively infected. Una isn't infected, and Mbenga and Hemmer have this really weird interaction in his like thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
That was kind of like a weird interaction between those two.
Yeah.
But I chalk it up to like you could tell like they both were starting to become like infected a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, probably. The only thing what I was gonna say was the only thing is I feel like this episode didn't need both characters to have a weird secret.
Yeah.
It's fine for the doctor to have a secret. I just think that they needed to focus just on Una stuff and
That's
not
true.
also because to be fair, and it's fine. I felt like how the episode ends is a little like too much because usually you're like, ooh, they're down on the planet. Una's weird. She comes up, she's still
Yeah.
weird. She glows, she's clearly hiding something, and then we proceed down the path. And then now the doctor's hiding something. Then fast forward as we go into it, and then it ends. And
Yeah.
she says stuff in her log, and you're like, oh, end of the episode. And they're like, no, not the end of the episode. Now we're gonna go to sick bay. And it's just
Yeah.
like, okay. I just feel like it needed to be two separate episodes. Or two, like, let her stuff play out, and then another episode let his stuff play out.
Yeah. They kind of did a rise of Skywalker too, where she says like all this like heartfelt stuff about like, you know, like when will it be enough?
Mm.
And like she can basically be a part of Starfleet, and Pike likes her on board and doesn't care about any of that stuff. And then she says, okay, now you can delete that. Like delete it. Like, I don't want that on record.
No. Burn it.
Okay, cool. I thought we kind of were learning from that, you know. But yeah, I get your point. I get your point. Like it was kind of like a little bit too much on top of everything else.
Yeah, I think sadly it overshadows both of them. It's like when you're like, oh, what's this about Una? Okay, this is interesting. Like, oh wow, what a problem, what an interesting decision to make, like as a writing thing, but also as a character. Like now on the show, you're like interested to see how she actually different, and is she something that the Federation should be afraid of? And just as you're trying to like ascertain like how good or bad she is, it's like, well, now we're going to throw the doctor stuff at you.
Yeah.
And now you're not fully invested into his story because her stuff has already happened. It's just like, I don't know. I just feel like they should have been separate.
Which makes them have to rush like her interaction with Lon too.
Yeah.
It's like just that scene where they're eating and she's like, hey, so did you really say that stuff, or was that and she's like, yes and yes, like I'm not like super happy that you lied.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of like, oh, okay, and they kind of resolve it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be a thing going forward where there'll always be a little bit of tension between the two. I don't really get why Lon is so worked up about eugenics when it was like her family like way in the past. I mean, she acts like she's a Gorn. I mean, the way that and it's like, okay, like who cares?
Yeah,
that was forever ago. You know,
I think
like,
it's because as she brings out, she was bullied in school for it. I think that's the only reason.
Yeah, and your whole family was eaten by giant lizard monsters. Yeah. Maybe let's move towards that a little bit.
She's got trauma.
Not to mention, like number one saved her life. So like you would think like it wouldn't matter.
True.
You would see through that, something that happened back in, the 90s with your great grandfather.
Yeah. Something that happened like I think 160 years ago. Something like that.
Yeah.
The going back to the whole like them kind of cramming their two secrets into this episode.
Yeah.
As I was watching it, I remember like the beats. I know what ends up happening with the doctor stuff, and I end up know what's happening with the Una stuff. So I'm like, okay, but I can't remember episode to episode like what. So when this happens and she glows in the beginning part, I was like, oh wow, episode 3 they reveal that she's this thing. Like I forgot it was in this episode. that all this happens. And I was like, oh man. And then it was like, and the doctor, and I was like, really? Like, we're only 3 episodes in, and they're immediately. I was just like, wow, okay.
Well, they're trying to get the audience like hooked. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah,
there's a lot of weird stuff going on in the ship. You should come
yeah.
back
It's like
next
they
week.
want everyone on the ship to be like have weird back stuff. Yeah.
So when number one first glowed in her room, I was like,
Mhm.
okay, so this is weird. So I was thinking maybe something.
Right.
How many times on like Enterprise is like something from the planet like inhabit the actual
Exactly.
people and they bring it back? So I was like, I'm thinking like she's got like an alien or parasite or something in her.
Right. Right.
And I was like, okay. And then they don't really show it again. And then when they fight in the engine room, lawn glows on the floor too. And I'm like, what? Why? I was like so confused.
Yeah.
Why they both were glowing.
Yeah.
And they just kind of do that like throwaway line where she's
Yes.
like, oh yeah, the radiation passed like my genetics onto her and like I healed her with my. So then I was like, oh, okay, so that's just her. When she glows, it's like her immune system fighting off stuff. I'm like, okay. I don't get how that passes through radiation to like person to person.
Yeah,
But
I'd have to look into the way that they explain it, but yeah. Okay, on the surface, Pike notes the source of the sound seemed to be gone. Spock's reading of the journals indicates that the colonists thought there were creatures living in the ion storms, a possibility which appears to have been confirmed. Just then, one of the creatures attempts to enter the open door, but Pike and Spock force it shut. Spock sustains a light slash to his neck, which was close to hitting where the carotid artery would be on a human. The creature begins to pound on the door, leading Pike to ask how long the door would hold. Spock suggests weighing probability in their favor. He appears to have an idea.
I like that. I like how Pike was like, oh man, that was really close to your carotid. And he's like, yeah, on a human. It's like, oh, where is it for you?
Yeah, like his I forget. I think it's like down where our liver is on humans is like where his heart is.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And he also has
That's
green
funny.
blood. Yay.
I remember they having green blood, but yeah, it was nice to see in this.
Yeah.
Because back in the 60s, they were like, hey, so what would show that they're alien? They're like, green blood, baby. That's
it.
Their blood consists of copper, not iron. Obviously.
That's right. That's right. In the quarters Uhura shared with the 2 infected crew, Una asks the cadet to take her through why she was not infected when the others were. Una explains that she prefers to sleep in pitch black conditions, comparing it to the Princess and the Pea. As she demonstrates for herself, Una comes to a realization and returns to sickbay. She explains to Mbenga and Chapel and Uhura was exposed to the same contagion, but she had been in the dark. Electromagnetic scans of the ship showed that the contagion seemed to travel through light waves, something Mbenga considers both insidious and remarkable. The infection they were dealing with affected the pleasure centers of the brain when close to light, but light was literally everywhere. Una suggests shutting down the lights all over the ship, but Chapel points out that sickbay was full of light addicts. Una wonders if it would be too intrusive to sedate them all, but given the alternatives, Mbenga is forced to concede it was the best option.
Light addicts.
Yeah. With that, all the lights aboard the Enterprise go dark. So, just that scene where Una is like goes, and it's like Rebecca Romaine is like a very tall woman, so it's like it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But like when she goes in there and she's like crunches up her knees to her face and then slides in, I was like, and then that little like I don't know if you remember it was like that lip was here.
Yeah.
Like where she would, and I was just thinking like it's cool looking, it's aesthetically cool looking, but it would be so you'd be every time you get out of bed, you'd be like, okay, I gotta like bring my feet all the way up to my chest and then swing my body out and then go out, and you'd be like, I would hate this. I would hate crawling into this thing.
As a 6'9" person,
sure.
I it's everything is like that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, in the conference room, Una has their computer narrow the search parameters to Illyrian genetic modifications. The computer warns they were classified, but Una overrides, then narrows the parameters further to modifications relating to disease control, which again are classified and which again she overrides. She sees a child patient in the records, showing the same red glow to her skin that Una had experienced alone in her quarters. Just then, the computer alerts her to a blackout override to the transport room, with the added danger of a critical circuit overload. Una calls down to the transport room, but receives no response, so goes down there herself. Hemmer is at the controls, having transported a piece of the planet's mantle. He too is experiencing the same symptoms, saying he wants to feel the radiance on his skin. Una sees a phaser on the console and warns that the temperature was more than 1,000 degrees. Temper gleefully replies it was closer to 10,000 and has almost stabilized the signal. As he approaches it, Una grabs the phaser and stuns him before reversing the beam. She carries him over her shoulder to sickbay.
It's none of your business how hot it is.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. I also like we'll talk about it later, but I like that it shows how each person thinks. They're just like, okay, well, I want to get hot, so I'll smash my face in this glass. And then the next people, they're like, oh, I want to get hot. They're like, well, we'll make a simulation of the sun and we'll just stand around it and burn ourselves.
Yeah, it's
And
basically based on your like field.
Yeah, and then it cuts the Hammer, and he's literally transporting a piece of the planet's mantle. And he's like, yes, yes. And he's like, I'm so close.
Yeah, of course the engineer is going to go like the extreme route and figure out how to transport a piece of the.
Pretty sure I could localize and
I think I could bring part of the core up here if I really. So here's a couple things now that we've mentioned. Well,
okay.
If they can't use the transporter to get Pike and Spock,
yeah,
how was he using the transporter to get part of the planet? Different location of the planet where the signal's not.
That's what I assumed when I first saw this too, because I did the same head scratch too.
Because I didn't even think about it till like you just were talking about it.
I did the same head scratch when Adrian and I were watching it last year. I was like, I don't. And then I was like, well, the storm isn't overtaking all of the planet. It's just only where Pike and Spock are. So
you're trying to get the signal from. Yeah. Okay. I can let that slide, I guess.
Yeah. You kind of just let it go.
And then the other thing that irritates me is this is in like a lot of stuff because it has to. Her and Lon have to have that conversation like later on in the engine room.
Oh yeah.
But so here's the thing: she has to stop Hammer with a phaser on stun.
Yeah.
In this situation, and then moving forward, she doesn't carry a phaser.
No, you would never.
And she's like the only one single-handedly like immune. She's like T'Pol. She's immune to like what's going on, and like doesn't carry a phaser. Yeah. She doesn't think like, oh, I might have to do this again.
Right.
Might have to sedate somebody. It was like, that'll be fine. And then she literally has to like fight Lon in like the engine room. She's got to like keep her away from the council. It's like, if you just brought the phaser and just shot her.
Yeah.
You could still have this conversation when you're telling her to like step away from the council. Right. You could still have that interaction without coming to blows. And she'd like obviously isn't going to stop. So you just like have to like shoot her and put her out.
Right.
And then
I think you'd even be satisfied if she brought the phaser to engineering, had that conversation, went to go do it, and Lon like knocked it out of her hand, and then they had to fight. Right.
Yeah. At least you're not going to walk around unarmed.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
It's just kind of that stuff kind of annoys me.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's because you don't want to shoot your friends. You don't want to shoot your friends.
Even to kind of like the scene with Pike and Spock where the thing finally comes in the room and he just stands there, and then as it gets closer, he goes and it like knocks it out of his hand. Even that to me is like, oh my god. But like it has to move the story forward, I get. But at least he was going to use his gun, you know?
Yeah. On the planet below, Pike has barricaded the door and drawn his own phaser, while Spock continues to examine the record cylinder. Pike asks if it too had a stun setting, to which Spock replies he was arming them with knowledge. The captain wonders if the Illyrians knew how to stop the creatures, but even if they did not, Spock thinks they could learn from the colonists' misfortune. The creatures did not kill the Illyrians. In fact, they began to appear just as the colonists were dying out due to a mysterious disease. Pike begins to feel his ears pop. The atmospheric pressure was increasing due to the storm. Just then, the creatures break through the door, disarming Pike. At the same time, the window shatters, forcing Pike and Spock to fall flat on the floor. The creatures seem to shield them from the storm's effects, which gradually dissipate. Pike notes that once again the creatures were gone. Spock concurs and adds that thanks to the creatures, they were not. The thing I liked when I originally saw it was I really enjoyed the fact that like these things came in and then just like help them. It's kind of like a thing that you don't like Star Trek does and doesn't do, because like this could go either way. Like it could be just an episode where these things are trying to murder them.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. Like they're not benevolent things. They're monsters, you know. So it's like I like that in the Star Trek episode, you don't honestly know really what is going to actually happen to these guys.
I don't know if it's a Star Trek like trope specifically, but like so at this point in the episode, I already was like, okay, so these are probably like the Valyrians. Like these are probably the people that were on the planet.
Yeah.
Like this is what happened to them. I don't know if that's a Star Trek trope, like where they do that a lot, but I feel like I remember that a lot where like some weird thing is on the planet, but it was like, oh, these were the people that were here a long time ago.
Oh yeah, it is definitely a Star Trek thing that they do a lot of the time where it's like, oh, this thing is eating people. And it's like it's some terrible monster that's just eating, consuming people, and then they scan and they're like, oh no, it's that lost officer that we haven't seen in 25 years. It's like, well, he is eating people, but it's not really what we think is eating. It's like when he reaches out to touch somebody, it's like they, you know, whatever, they melt or something, and it looks like he's eating them. And it's like, no, he's just trying to be rescued. He wants to be rescued, and he's deformed and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, it's a very Star Trek thing that the bad thing is usually a good thing, meaning no harm.
I think about the episode where they're on that planet with the hunters.
Oh, yes.
And they're very much like, oh yeah, these things are like horrible. You know, like we hunt them. And then it was just like a slug that inhabited the planet that just didn't want people on the planet and would use like take form of things to like get you to leave.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Una enters sickbay with Heber over her shoulder and tells Mbenga and Chapel to sedate him before he recovers from the stun. Mbenga reports that he will have to be next, as his vitamin levels were also dropping, and now only he and Chapel were left. Una asks about the blood sample Mbenga took earlier, before finally admitting that she was immune to the illness because she herself was Illyrian. Both Mbenga and Chapel are adamant that even with that knowledge, they could not use her blood to help. Going into his office while Chapel attends to awakening patients, Mbenga explains that there were no novel antibodies in Una's blood, consistent with Illyrian biology. Her system did not attack the infection, but literally burnt it out, which meant that he had nothing to work with anyway. If he had been present at the moment of her infection, he could have. But now he saw no other option. Una tells him he was a Starfleet doctor and could figure out a way. Mbenga sees she places a lot of faith in Starfleet, and Una admits they were right about a lot of things, but not all of them. Mbenga understands that prejudice has kept people from helping each other for centuries, with no scientific justification. And even after meeting their neighbors in the stars, they found new bigotries. First about mixing human and Vulcan blood, and now human and Illyrian. To Mbenga, that did not matter. as he was a physician. He would beg her to help if he could. Regulations be darned, but he knows that she can't. He pleads with her to sedate him before he lost control, and reluctantly she does. As the doctor goes unconscious, the computer warns that the containment field generator on the warp core has been deactivated, potentially leading to a warp core breach. Una rushes out to find Chapel unconscious on the floor and Lalonde gone.
Mm. I really like this interaction specifically.
Yeah. Yep.
I really like harping back to like Vulcan and human was like, frowned upon. And now
Right.
even moving forward, like now it's like there's still another, that's just another thing.
Something else. Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool because like she wants to help, and she's trying to, from her point of view, she's trying to convince them to like use her blood to help.
Right.
Thinking that like they won't because it's against like Federation rules. But
Yeah,
I but overall, like being a medical officers there, they could care less about Starfleet rules. Like if it's gonna save people, we're gonna do it. Like scientifically and medically. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, that he's not super staunch. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing is too, is there are characters like throughout Star Trek history that are very by the books. And it's like,
Yeah, I wonder.
You sometimes are led to be like, I hate this individual, or this individual is really awful. But then when you think about it, it's like, well, they're just as passionate as the other guy is. It's just they just stick closer to, whatever regulation or whatever. So it's an interesting thing that they are able to do a lot of times in Star Trek is like you get to see how basically how heroic or how good natured this person is simply by them just ignoring Starfleet regulations because, well, it's going to murder people or whatever.
Yeah, I like that. I was just thinking, I wonder if it's one of those things too. Like, I wonder if like Flock would do it, if Flock would have a problem with it.
Yeah, I
Probably
don't know if
not. He's not super like into like Starfleet rules.
Yeah,
he has more of like a code.
yeah.
I
think he would do it because I think he would just be like, well, so what? Like,
yeah, it's science. This comes down to science, and
right.
He would have no problem with it. Because I think he talks about like the eugenics war and says like a lot of species do eugenics and they have had no problems. It's just the humans that have made them and almost destroyed the planet, basically. He's like, scientifically, it works fine. It's just the humans don't know how to do it.
Right.
What was the episode though where there was something that Archer like made him do and like commanded him as the captain to do it, and he had like a really hard time doing it? Was it the Trip one where they made that clone of Trip?
There is that one.
He didn't Phlox didn't super love that, but there was one where he like very much said, Captain, I'm not doing that. And Archer said, well, then I will remove you from the ship, essentially.
I think one of them was a torture scene. He wanted Phlox to like basically hurt this guy to get information, and Phlox was like, nope. And I think the other one was the one where Phlox comes across the people that his people have bigotries against.
Yeah.
And I think Archer's like, yeah, we'll get over it type of thing. I think so.
Yeah.
It's been a minute since I've seen all the episodes, but yeah.
I think in that one, he just tells Archer like it would be a conflict of interest, like for him to like treat that patient.
Yeah. Okay.
And Archer says, if he's on board, you're gonna treat him like you're taking my command. I don't care about your
right.
And it's got nothing to do with like your species. It's he's a patient on my ship.
On my ship, right? Yeah.
I like that episode. That was a good episode too.
Those episodes are always there where somebody's like, I don't want to, and he's like, but you
I don't like this person.
Yeah.
I don't like my species, their ridges go this way, and on his species, they go this way. And I hate him. I hate him for that.
Yep. I don't think I'm showing you the episode. Because it's a iconic episode, but it's also very long and drawn out.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be a racial black and white thing.
Uh-huh.
And so literally, no joke, to your point, you'll love this. The aliens, whatever is there, there's two aliens.
Yeah.
And one is called whatever, and the other one's called whatever. And this guy has this side of his face, half of his face is black, and this side of his face is like literally painted white. Okay, like so painted black, painted white. It's not like different skin tones of human.
The other species is the other way, right?
And it's literally that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, well, no, they're angry at each other and they want to kill each other and all this stuff. And everybody's like, but it's just literally a reversal, and it's like, who cares type of thing.
I don't care.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
the one species, they call them black and whites, the cookies, and they also, what's the other word?
Half moon.
Half moons, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been a debate throughout human history for a long, long time. Like, do you eat the chocolate side first or do you eat the vanilla side first?
Yeah. I recently just saw somebody eat right down the middle.
Wow. That's smart. That way you don't offend anybody.
Yeah, that's right. Just eat it.
Neutral. Stay neutral, baby. That's
well, somebody will get mad. Are you putting the chocolate on the left side of your mouth or the right side of your mouth? There will
what if
always
you
be
cut
somebody.
It, you got to cut it in half and then fold it.
Bam.
You get them both.
Yeah,
yeah.
But is the black on top or is the black on top? And somebody will always be angry. They'll always find something.
You're right.
So Lan is at the containment field council, bringing down the containment field. Una pleads with her to stop, but Lan is obsessed with flooding the ship with light. They struggle over the control of the console. Una pleading with Lan that she knew her, that she was her friend. Lan spits back that Una lied to her for years, that she was an augment, an abomination, just like what the children had called her because of her name. Una knocks Lan unconscious with a punch, but the radiation levels in engineering have grown toxic to organic life, causing her Illyrian healing factor to kick in as the computer warns of the imminent core breach.
He turns into Wolverine.
Yeah. I like the use of augment, much because it harkens back to Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah.
I like that when
Yeah,
she
I like
says
that.
it several times. I enjoy it. It's the thing that I think honestly why I like Strange New Worlds as much as I do is it's literally because it's like they just are like, Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate that.
Because honestly, I know we've talked about it. It'll be sad for you. It'll literally Strange New Worlds will end, and then they'll never talk about the Enterprise ever again. So,
yeah, it's a bummer.
Yeah.
It's funny because like that's where I started, so I don't understand why that's like not like people don't like it as much.
Yeah. I think it's a thing that if you were like most people and you started with the original series or Next Generation and then you watched everything, when you would get to Enterprise, it would be like, well, why are the Vulcans like this? This doesn't make any sense. And why do the Klingons like this? This doesn't make any sense. It's the one of those things. Is because
but if it's like in the past, obviously it's like a storyline beat,
Yes.
It's not like, oh, why are they like this now? It's like, no, it's 100 years ago.
Right. Yeah. It's No, I totally understand. I have no problem. Like when I watched it back in the day, it was fine watching it with that. But I have just found that watching Star Trek this way really lends to itself.
Yeah.
You actually feel like humanity has gotten better and has gone deeper into space and has explored strange new worlds and done more things.
Yeah.
When you watch
I
it the
know.
way it was released, like by release date and by calendar, it's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it. It's just you just end up being like basically right when you're interested in how the Federation is developing and how they handle certain things that happened in Deep Space Nine
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. You're like, right when you're really invested, they're like, okay, let's go back in time like 200 years. And you're like,
By then, yeah.
okay. You're like, all right. That's what a lot of
Yep.
people's issues were, is they wanted to see more content going forward rather than go back.
I can understand that. Yeah, I get that does make sense.
But also at the same time, I've heard a lot in other podcasts and other interviews is like the franchise was starting to have like fatigue.
Yeah.
They had literally been on the air since 1987, and now it was 2001, and Star Trek is still on television.
Yeah.
It's like it's a form of Star Trek had been on the air for 14 years.
You can only do First Contact so many times.
Right.
It's kind of the same beat story wise.
And even super popular shows like Friends and Cheers and Frasier and like King of Queens, like they only go like 9, 10, 11 seasons.
Yeah.
And eventually they're like, okay, we got to do something. It's like, well, these shows are now going on for an additional like 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
Different storylines, different characters, different stuff, but generally the same feel.
Yep. No, I can 100% see like how it would feel the same.
But we're kind of in the renaissance as they say right now, so we're kind of in a cool period where stuff keeps getting better and better.
Because that's kind of the thing too. It's cool about like this about Strange New Worlds and Enterprise is that like you can watch Deep Space Nine and like every week it's something, but I like to see like where all that stuff started from, like how did humans like get into space? How did they start Starfleet? How did they like get all that stuff going?
Yeah.
Like what did they have to overcome to like get into space? Because
Right.
like you start Deep Space Nine and it's just like, yeah, space travel, where everything's established, everything's great. It's like, yeah, that's cool. That's a cool concept. But like how?
Like how did we get here?
How did they do it? Like how did they get everybody to join? How did Earth get every other species to join their federation? You know what I mean? I like that's why.
Me too. On the surface, the storm appears to have cleared, and Pike again tries to call the Enterprise, but is answered only with static. He thinks it's safe to go outside again and remarks on how the creatures had gone to great lengths to save their lives. If that was the case, why didn't they do so for the colonists? Spock sees two possibilities. Either one, they were not motivated to save the colonists due to some previous interaction, or two, they were the colonists. Spock had found references to odd behavior relating to the previously mentioned disease. The infected had a compulsion for light, and some were driven to insanity and driven into the storms themselves. Pike wonders if that wouldn't have killed the colonists, and Spock confirms it, though theorizes that the charged particles would have bonded with the colonists' electromagnetic presence, creating what they saw. As they speak, a second record cylinder pops out, as if on its own. It is a thorough account of the colonists' effort to renounce their genetic engineering in order to join the Federation. It would seem, even in death, Spock concludes, they wanted us to be aware of who they really were. It's honestly kind of like, it's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it really shows Pike that like, they want to be in the Federation so badly that they'll like literally do anything to make this happen.
Yeah, it's they're augmented, but like they're willing to like destroy everything about like their culture and their like history just to be a part of some stupid like organization.
Right.
So like, how could you not feel bad about that? Like you said, like, no, you can't be a part of our cool kids club. And they basically like destroyed their planet and like killed everybody in their population, like to try to join it.
Yeah.
How could you not feel responsible for that?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And just because of a stupid, it's basically like, yeah, it's just another prejudice thing. It's just another stupid.
Something that happened almost 200 years ago.
Yeah,
is holding.
we did something stupid when we were manipulating our genes 100 years ago. So going forward, we don't like that. We're too scared of it. We're too scared of it. So we'll forget it.
Yeah. It's a thing. I'll tell you right now, it is a thing that does not go away. It's a thing that they perpetually will always have issues with as time goes forward.
I would be more worried about the Borg, to be honest with you, but
I mean, they do get pretty worried about the Borg, but yeah. Okay, as they walk out to the rendezvous point, Spock notes how some Illyrians were bioengineered to fight disease. Had they not tried to reverse their augmentation, they might not all have died. They wanted to join the Federation so badly, their good faith gesture got them killed, Pike agrees grimly. In sickbay, Una brings Mbenga back to consciousness and explains she had an antidote. La'an had tried to jump into the warp core, and both were exposed to lethal doses of radiation. But Una's healing ability was able to save them both before she re-engaged the field. Chapel adds that La'an was not Illyrian, but her proximity to Una created chimeric antibodies in her system, and Chapel was able to synthesize them into a cure before they set. Don't thank me. I know I'm good at my job, Chapel cheerfully adds. And Mbenga tells Una that they all owed her their lives, but Una looks grim for a moment. There was something she had to take care of. La'an sits alone in the recreation room eating from a bowl of strawberries as Una sits across from her. Una remarks she packs one heck of a punch, which was not meant as a compliment. La'an asks what the penalty for striking a superior officer is, but Una can't seem to remember, asking if they were still friends. La'an admits that part of what she said was the sickness talking, but part of it was her own hatred of augments, given how she had been treated being a descendant of Khan, and understanding why augments were banned in the Federation, as they had nearly destroyed Earth. Una acknowledges the damage augments had done, but Illyrians were different, seeking to collaborate with nature, not dominate it. Instead of transforming planets, they adapted themselves instead, and Una sees nothing wrong with that. La'an counters by asking if Una really felt that. Why hide it, particularly from her? Una admits she's hidden it from a lot of people, but all she had ever wanted since first seeing the stars was to be in Starfleet. La'an knows, as Una had given her that dream, and also introduced her to strawberries as a comfort food.
Again, it's just it's just stupid. It's one of those like, you lied to me. It's like, okay,
yeah,
got it. But again, like you said, she's mad about the fact that she's an augment because she was picked on in school. And not to mention the fact that augments were human creation.
Right.
Right. And Illyrians are a completely different species.
Right.
And like, they're fine. So it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, I get being mad at the augments. They destroyed the planet. Like, your stupid human scientists made augments wrong, and they almost destroyed the planet. Illyrians are alien species. They're like Vulcans. They've been around for thousands and thousands of millennia, and they're doing just fine. I think they got the whole like gene splicing under control. I think they're good. I think they're completely different. But that one bully said, "Oh, yeah, your great grandfather was a crazy person," and she's like, "Oh my god." Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. She's just, she's having a hard time. She's just having a hard
time. It's been rough for her, honestly. These past 2 episodes have been pretty rough.
Yeah. That's why she eats strawberries. Helps her right out.
It's funny. It's funny. Like the first episode of Strange New Worlds, I was like, yeah, she's kind of cool, you know?
Yeah.
And then the second episode, now this episode, I'm just kind of like over her character at this point. I'm just like, I'm just waiting for next episode for her to do something stupid again, and me be like, oh my god,
No, that's definitely not going to happen.
no, we get it, You're a depressed individual, like you know,
No.
you had it rough. We got it.
No. They definitely don't use it through all of the season.
So is that why, like in the first episode, I was like, yeah, so she's kind of cool, and you're like, mm-hmm, yes, she
Kind of.
is very cool.
Yeah,
She's
it's a thing where I
definitely
don't-
not a fan hated person.
it's a thing where I'll just put it to you this way: she's rough in the beginning, and then once they milk the trauma and like
Yeah.
go through how terrible she is, and she has kind of like a redeeming thing, then you're like, and she's fine at that point. It's like
Okay.
she needs to come out of her shell and accept the Enterprise crew as family. It's like that's what they're building towards.
And I get that. And I'm not saying they should rush through that, because
No,
obviously, like,
I know what you mean.
can't.
I totally know what you mean. She's rough in the beginning. I don't disagree with you at all. She wasn't my favorite when I was watching it. Either was Ortegas. But that's okay. She still isn't. I don't really like her. But that's all right. Una stands before Pike, returned from the surface, and confesses she is an Illyrian. By hiding her augmentations and enlisting in Starfleet, she has committed a Federation offense and announces she is resigning her commission and submitting herself for disciplinary action, asking only that her sincere desire to be in Starfleet be taken into consideration. Pike rejects her resignation, saying he doesn't care where she's from and calling her the best first officer in the fleet. Pike attempts to stop her from going further, but Una warns him that she has broken a dozen regulations, lying to get into Starfleet, and if he shelters her, Starfleet would go after him as well. Pike replies that he would welcome that discussion and tells her that he learned something on Hemeta 9. Illyrians were severely misunderstood, and Una's actions during the crisis only emphasize that point. Una says that she only did her job, but Pike replies that she defies every stereotype the Federation had about Illyrians. When she asks what Starfleet would do when they found out, Pike chuckles and tells her to let him worry about Starfleet. Before she goes, he tells her to look into fixing the glitch in the transporter's biofilters. So to your point, Pike basically is like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But I don't care.
But I like that Pike is like that as a captain. That again, he's like, I'll talk to command. I don't give a crap. It's my ship. I'm not gonna.
Right.
Like, what am I gonna do? Like, accept your resignation and take you home? And be like, well, after everything that like I've seen, like, I could care less what the Federation has to say about it.
Right. Exactly.
He's the type of captain where if she's such a trusted member of his staff that if Federation said anything about it, that he would say, well, then you're gonna look for a new captain then, because I'm gone. I'm not gonna stand for that crap.
Right.
That's a good captain, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Una goes down to sick bay and confronts Mbenga, knowing that he didn't allow the medical transporters to be upgraded while the ship was in space dock. She suspects that was because Mbenga couldn't allow them to do so, and reveals that Hemmer's diagnostics showed that something was being kept in the pattern buffer. And whatever it was, he had to preserve it, even if it meant killing everyone on the ship. And Mbenga denies that was his intention and says it was an accident. Una demands to know what he was keeping in there that could have been worth all of their lives. Not what, he quietly corrects her. Who? He explains he was keeping his daughter Rukia in the pattern buffer. She had been diagnosed with cynomia 1 year earlier and was given 12 weeks to live. He ruefully notes how he was the chief medical officer aboard the Federation flagship, and one would think he could do something about it, but nothing he had tried worked. He explains there was no limit to how long a pattern could be kept in the buffer, only having to rematerialize them regularly. In the buffer, Rukia did not age, and the disease did not progress. On a ship that could travel light years in a matter of hours, and Benga is sure somewhere out there is a planet with the discovery he needed. Nonetheless, he realizes the light virus epidemic had been his fault, never thinking that could have happened, and promises it would not happen again. However, before he is returned to Starfleet, he asks that he be allowed a moment to say goodbye to his daughter. Una surprised him by offering to have a dedicated power source directed from the warp core to ensure the problem did not happen again. As she leaves, she tells him she looks forward to meeting Rukia one day. After she leaves, Mbenga activates the privacy screen in his office and brings Rukia out of the buffer and picks up a story he was reading her from where he left off. Rukia protests that he had read the story 100 times, but the doctor jokes that perhaps the story's ending could change. So this is the part where I really like what they did. They do a cool thing, which I can't tell you. I wish I could tell you, but it'll spoil a lot of things. They do a cool thing here, which I like. And then, but I feel like learning that Una is Illyrian and that she got through Federation regulations and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not
like overshadowed by him having this thing in the pattern buffer.
Mm-hmm.
And also him having the thing in the pattern buffer is overshadowed by her being an Illyrian. And I just felt like, I don't know, I just felt like it could have been better.
It's kind of like two major character plots.
Yeah. But the one thing I really, really liked in this scene, and it even kind of got like a catch in my throat, is when he says to her, listen, like, I know you're going to take me in, but before you take me back to Starfleet and I face my problems, like, please let me say goodbye to her. And then she goes, no. And his face in that scene, I was like, oof. Because you see a mix of so many emotions on him. Like, he's angry and he's horribly depressed, and like he just doesn't know what to do in that. And it only lasts like 2 beats, like 2 seconds, you know. But still, his acting in that scene was very, very good.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah, and the thing that is cool about that is that you can see that it's Pike rubbing off on her too. Because basically, like, he forgave her, and now she can, move that forward. It's one of those things too where it's like, if the doctor would have just talked to Pike and said, like, look, I'm trying to look for a cure for my daughter, but I need to keep her in the buffer, and if we can do that would be great. And Pike would have said, yeah, I'll give you same thing she did, like, I'll give you like your own standalone like power source to keep it running. It could have all been avoided, it could have just been.
I agree.
But again, I like that people on board have secrets. It's a very
I love it. I love that they're layered characters and they're not just like he's just a guy on the ship and he likes to do medical things. Like, it's nice that there's depth to these people. Yeah. All right, so here's our last little stretch. In her quarters, Una dictates an entry into her log mentioning how people had things to hide, yet were revealing themselves. And Benga had shown what he was hiding, and Una had admitted the truth about herself to Pike, who had defended her. Yet she can't help but wonder, if she had not helped save the crew, would he have felt the same? What if she had not been one of the good ones? When will it be enough to just be an Illyrian? She wonders, before she asks the computer to delete the log entry. As the Enterprise departs Hemetet 9 and goes to warp, Mbenga continues to read from the story. If King Ridley would seek out the Mercury Stone and win it as his own, his victory over Queen Nev would be assured. It is said that in the right hands, the Mercury Stone has the power to cleanse the land of evil and bring prosperity to all. But if it were to fall into the wrong hands, the Mercury Stone's power would bring about a terrible, long-lasting dark age across the land. And that concludes our episode.
Next episode is called The Mercury Stone.
Yep. Yeah, so there we go. That's
Yeah.
brings
So
it all
I think-
together.
I think too that it's interesting that when he says to her, to number one, like if I knew I could use your DNA, I would beg you. I would beg you for it. But like he
Right.
knows he can't synthesize it. And that kind of speaks to like even towards the end, like when you find out about his daughter.
Yeah.
Like he would 100% use her
Yes.
DNA to like help his daughter.
Yeah.
And
He
it kind of ties that whole thing together. And I like that.
Yeah, it's a thing where they do a good job of making it all connect and like making his secret and her secret like they're forced to reveal them. Yeah, they do
Yeah.
a good job with it. It's just the thing I've talked about 5 or 6 times now. It's just
Yeah.
like I feel like it overshadows it.
It's a lot for the episode, but like you said, they do a good job of bringing both of those storylines together and make them kind of work in the same episode, like the same
Yeah.
thing that they're both dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
other thing that we haven't talked about is that like I love the intro. So there's like the cold open like stinger, right, where it's the Delta comes up and it does like the music.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that's great. And then the episode starts, and then they cut to the credits, the intro credits.
Yeah.
And that whole like sequence of like the Enterprise like flying through space and
Yeah.
the music, it's so good. Like it's so
Yeah.
so good. And the other thing I love, and it could get very annoying, is every time they enter the bridge, it does that like classic like whistle.
Yeah.
And
I think it's called a boat swing or whatever. Yeah.
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 It's super good. It kind of shows you, it kind of sets this like into that like Kirk era.
Oh, yes. Yes.
I still think they do a very good job of like blending this like modernly, but keeping that
Yes.
aspect, like that's the aspect that it's going to the Kirk era.
I agree.
So like the uniforms and the phasers they're really cool. Like this episode, I was very much focused on like sleeves of like the
Okay.
uniform. Because like the bands, you know, the little bands
Yeah.
that go around, they're very like they look like the old ones, but they're modern and they're more sleek and they're like they're not just like a glossy
Yeah.
like material. They're like actual like plastic or whatever.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah,
looks
absolutely.
cool. Like I just like the look.
Yeah, absolutely. Their uniforms are pretty cool and decent, like especially like going forward, you're jumping back in time like 55 years,
Yeah.
but at the same time, they try to keep a certain aesthetic going, and you try to match what they have, and really if they had the money and they had the time, like they probably would make things similar. So it's like it's a nice blend of
Mm-hmm.
everything, like you're saying, modern, but also being like, yeah, but we're gonna make sure that this, even if it doesn't make sense in a modern way, and they did it, this is how they did it back in the 60s, like that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
It's like we're gonna do this. This is what stuff looks like.
I wonder if they made this show and they just kind of remade everything to look the same.
Yeah.
Like they made like the stitched on deltas
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. I wonder, if the fans would love it or if you would want it modernized a little bit.
I think at the
don't
end
know.
of the day, at the very end of the day, no matter what, any true fan would be ecstatic to see anybody in original uniforms. Like it doesn't matter what series.
Yeah.
Rather than seeing a modern take on it, I think at the end of the day, you'd rather when it does happen, and it does happen a few times, when you see a character in a different uniform that's not modern, it's just like literally they pulled it out of the production closet of that
Yeah.
series. You're like, nice.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that being pretty cool.
So I won't spoil. I'm not gonna spoil nothing, but it's on the horizon.
Well,
So-
I've seen pictures and stuff of like Archer and everybody
Okay. Well,
dressed up like that. So I know they kind of do this like time into the Shadow Darkly or whatever those 2 episodes I haven't watched. I know they kind of deal with like time thing.
yeah.
And I've been kind of spoiled. I've seen like Trip, whatever he's called. He's like his face is all melted.
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a cool thing, and I really dig it, and it's been good so far. I will admit at this point, since now between our 2 episodes, episode 1 of season 2 has come out, and it's fine, but I definitely didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed episodes from this season.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It's I think it honestly comes down to 2 things. And one was the thing that you and I always complain about, which is you're taking modern issues and ham-fisting it into a series that has overcome those modern issues.
Yeah.
Like, racism and sexism and equality has been met. Like, it's over with. They're not sexist. They're not racist. They're not like, well, you can't do that because of this thing. Nobody cares anymore in Star Trek. That's the point of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Is
So you
doesn't
don't need
matter
to
if you're a
talk about
woman,
it.
doesn't matter if you're a black guy. It doesn't. No one cares. And in fact, not only does nobody care, they embrace it. They like it. Let's talk more about it. So when they do that type of stuff, they're like, oh, well, they're dealing with these modern issues of women not being treated fairly, or how the political system is being driven apart by a singular individual or a group of people. They're like, well, that's how Star Trek is too. And you're like, no, it's not. It's not. So that they did a little bit of that. And then the other thing was just filming, just a lot of weird camera decisions that I think just made it feel weird more than cool. But I don't know, when I go back to rewatch it with you and after I've seen everything, like I may feel differently, but just, right off the heels of the first episode, I was like, especially now watching this.
Yeah.
It's not like I have like a memory of the show like a year ago and I'm like, oh yeah, it's like I'm currently watching the first season. So
Well, that's kind of, so far that seems to be par for the course for Star Trek stuff. From what I've seen so far, is that like a couple seasons are like really good, and then there's kind of ones that are just kind of like, you kind of slog to get through.
But yeah, it's okay. I mean, you still I got a whole host of them to watch, so it's like it'll be okay.
Well, you got to see Spock playing the harp, though. I mean,
it's true.
I have no idea what the relevance of that. I just know everyone's been talking about it.
Yeah. It's true. Okay, so now here we are. We're at the part where Caleb. So, Caleb.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. What who gets the Elizabeth Cutler Award for being most forgettable?
Lon.
Yeah, okay.
Again, she does nothing this episode, and she complains at the end and then eats strawberries. That's it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna let you pick that one. I'm gonna let you pick it. This time I'm not gonna alter it. So you pick
I
one.
can't think.
No, it's what you pick. It's what you pick. So the one I was thinking was Uhura. So she's in it.
Oh yeah.
And then she comes out of the bed and she's like, what's wrong? And then she's not. She's also not sick.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, wow, that's really interesting. And then that's it.
Well, yeah. And then number one sits on the bed and she's like, so what are you doing today? It's just kind of like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, you're
That's true. Because she
I
goes
know.
on the bridge. She goes on the bridge and then she says, she's talking to Pike, and then Uhura goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I lost the signal. There's no more signal."
Yeah,
And then that's it.
yeah. But we're gonna keep Lon because 2 weeks now you've picked Lon as most forgettable, so we're gonna let it be.
Yeah.
We're gonna let it be. Okay, so
No, I picked
You ended up
Kirk last
picking-
week.
right, I know,
picked
but you
Kirk.
initially started with Lon. You were like, she's most forgettable because you didn't like what she did.
Yeah.
And then I convinced you yet again to pick, like,
Well,
basically
no.
influenced you to pick Kirk, and you picked
didn't.
Kirk.
You didn't. I mean, honestly, that's why I picked Kirk, because I said I literally forgot even about
He was in
he
the
was in the episode. So obviously,
I mean, he's also forgettable in this episode. He's not even in it.
He's not even in it.
Yeah.
I should have picked Kirk again.
Okay, so who gets the Trip Tucker Award as being the MVP?
Number one.
Yeah,
She's pretty great in this episode.
yeah. Una's the MVP of this episode. That's for sure.
Yeah, I like Una. And it's cool that they explain too why she glows. The doctor
Yeah, I
said
know,
like
right?
her
Yeah.
immune system literally like burns out the infection. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
So, who gets the Shran Award? What was the best action sequence of the show, of the episode?
Probably Pike and Spock when they're boarding the door and the window breaks and all that stuff happens, and then those
Yeah,
glowing.
when they're getting like surrounded and stuff. Yeah.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Even like when they initially had to like run away from the storm was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Not really anything super actiony happened. I mean, there was that fight between
Right.
Uma and Lon, but I don't
Yeah.
care about that. And because again, she should have just had a face pistol on stun, and it would have been
Right.
done.
Right. Yeah.
So I can't look past that.
No.
Yeah, not
I
a whole lot
agree.
of action.
It's a really great sequence, and it's cool how they handle it and everything, and how it kind of looks like people like holding hands around them and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's cool. The design of those like wisp things are pretty cool.
Okay, so what gets the NX award is some sweet ship stuff.
I'll go with the transporter.
Okay.
It was cool. I like seeing like when there's interference on the transporter, and you can see the people kind of beam in and kind of beam out. Like you can see them kind of like form the shape.
Yeah.
And then when Hemmer basically can beam an entire section of the core of the planet on board, like it shows you like the power of the transporter.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Is there one that you like more? Did you like seeing the mantle, or did you like seeing the outlines of the people?
I like seeing the mantle more, probably.
Okay. I like it. See, the thing I like, I didn't comment on about it last week. The thing that I like, and I know it really makes you hurt your head to do this, but the thing I like is sometimes you'll be like this thing, and I'll be like, oh, cool. It's cool. I like it because it's like you don't give just like generic answers. Like last week, I was like, what's some really cool ship thing that you liked?
Oh,
And I thought you were going to be like, I liked, with the thing, them shooting at each other, or like, whatever, this thing. And then you were like, Pike's quarters are pretty cool. And I was like, all right. Like, I liked that you,
yeah.
even in the cage, right? You were like, I really enjoy this thing. And then I was like, all right. And then you're like, it's the paper printer. That thing was cool. I was like, oh yeah.
Well, you got to remember too. I come to it from like the like builder and like scene kind of guy. Like I'm looking like at that kind of stuff.
Yeah, which is good. It's a good insight.
Yeah, I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like seeing how stuff functions.
Yeah.
Because anybody can say, "Oh, well, when the Enterprise is flying through the sky and shooting lasers, like obviously that's cool." But like,
no, I agree. I like that you have like an outside of the box appreciation for things. It's not just like normal, like, oh yeah, when this guy shot a phaser. The best action sequence was when they were punching each other in the engine room. You're like, no, it was this thing, which I like.
yeah,
It's as a I know it's like sounds narcissistic, but as like a fan of this, I enjoy like when I go back to listen to it or anything. It's like you have different viewpoints than like an average Star Trek or just random viewer. Like you have like a
Yeah.
different appreciation of things.
Well, that's good because I always feel like I always forget about this segment, and we just talk about it for an hour, and then you ask me questions. I'm like, let's see what happened in this episode.
Was this the episode where?
I liked when it rained on the
Oh, no.
planet.
I liked when he shot the glass and it really was melted. That was my favorite.
Yep.
Even better was probably be like, no, my favorite part was when he was running on the gangway and everything was blowing up behind him, and then they barely got him transported. And he was like, "Oh God, you transported me? I thought these things were dangerous." And he's like, "Well, we had no other choice, Captain." And I'll be like, "That's Enterprise."
Yeah. I like when they're all on that planet and they go outside to get in the shuttle to leave, and it's raining acid, and they have to like shoot their way to the ship. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. And Lon was like, I don't like the ship because it's blue. And when I was a kid, everyone said, "Oh, you're always wearing blue."
Yeah, blue. Your shirt is red. Okay. What gets the Porthos Award?
Cheesiest part of the
What's the
episode.
cheesiest? What's the cheesiest part?
The two guys in the quarter with Ahura when she wakes up.
Oh,
She turns the simulation off.
yeah.
That was pretty ridiculous.
Why do you turn off the light?
Turn it on.
Yeah.
We need the light.
I agree. That was pretty funny.
It was really funny. It kind of came out of nowhere, and it was
Yeah.
like, oh man, that was fun. That was a little cheesy because it just everybody else was like they would just shine the light in their face, and those two guys were like,
Where's the light?
Yeah.
like, wow, these guys are sick.
We got to get these guys to the sick bay immediately. Can you imagine later when everything's fine and they're back in there?
Yeah.
And she's just like, "Hey guys," and they're like, "Hey, we're really sorry," and she's just like, "Yeah, whatever." Like, you're pretty weird.
So you guys see any good light bulbs lately? Or-
Yeah. All right, here it is. What gets the Enterprise Award? What was the best thing in the episode?
I'm gonna have to say just like the overall storyline.
Okay.
I think it's probably the best part of the show is like fighting off the disease, like specifically like the doctor stuff,
Okay.
like people being sick and having to find a cure like on the ship while like Pike and Spock are gone.
Oh, okay. So like kind of when they come to the realization that this thing is like spreading through the ship, and they're like,
Yeah.
how do we counteract this?
Yeah, I kind of like the whole like containment breach
Okay. I know what you mean.
type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like the major part of the episode. Like that's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it starts.
it
hinges on that basically.
I can never just pick one thing that's like the best part of the episode.
Oh, I know.
It's tough, you know. And Pike didn't give any speeches. He really wasn't in the episode a whole lot, actually.
It
now that you
wasn't.
think
No,
about it.
no, not too much.
He didn't even do a captain's log.
Nope.
What's up with that? What's the deal?
All right. Well, that concludes what did Caleb think? We know it. And so what we'll ask now as our avid viewers, we'll ask that you not only did you do something earlier if you were watching this whole way through, but we'll ask that you write in the comments what you thought of this episode. We'd like to hear your thoughts. So write them on down below.
Yeah, give us a list of your
Yeah.
what does Caleb think?
Yeah. Let us know what your favorite things were, what your cheesiest, what you thought was cheesy. Tell us.
Yeah.
Next week, we will cover episode 4 of Strange New Worlds with the episode entitled Memento Mori. So we're at the point now where I ask you to do things for us. So if you liked it, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. If you want to see more of this content, make sure that you're subscribed. And if you don't want to miss us putting these things out, which I usually get them out on Sundays evening, make sure to ring that bell for notifications.
Yeah, subscribe. And if you know any Star Trek fans in your life and they are watching stuff from the beginning or want to watch stuff from the beginning, this is kind of like a cool thing to like. I have a lot of podcasts too that like I listen to about shows.
Yeah.
And like I'll go back and I'll rewatch the episode and then I'll listen to their podcast after.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like we're the only ones doing this. We're the only ones talking about
Right.
Star Trek. So
Yeah.
So you're gonna, why wouldn't you watch this one?
Yeah.
You could watch an inferior Star Trek show, or you can join our Federation of the Nerdholes and reach for the stars.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're on a podcast website or app listening to this, we appreciate you listening. Rate us, review us on whatever platform you're listening on. We would appreciate it. And if you're here on YouTube, where we mainly show stuff, 10 out of 10, we appreciate you watching. We'll catch you next week when we cover Memento Mori. Thanks for sticking around, folks. See ya.
Hello, this is Ensign Isaac Clarke. I'm taking a break from working on the warp coils so that I can read a few things to you guys. First of all, the Retrek Review is a Via Non Capta podcast. It's produced in association with the Plastic Underground Props. It's hosted by Will Wilbur and Caleb Stoddard. It's edited by Will Wilbur. Our intro song is by Kaylee Joy Rookledge. Our theme song is by Samo Studios. And our outro song is by Tommy Lee. Title card art created by Caleb Stoddard. The trophy art is created by Adri Wilbur from Love by the Letters. Synopsis and written plot provided by MemoryAlpha.com. Star Trek is created by Gene Rottenberry, and all official clips and pictures are owned by Paramount Pictures. You can follow us at the Plastic Underground Props and Via Non Capta on Instagram and YouTube. And stay frosty.